In this video, we're going to talk about system settings on your Fortigate firewall. The first thing you want to do is give your firewall a hostname. In the system global configuration context, when you issue the show command, then you get to see the alias, which is the nickname, and the hostname, the proper hostname for the firewall. We want to change both. DC Firewall 01. And for the alias, I'll name it exactly the same. Then the hostname has taken effect. One of the other config parameters that you can configure from here is the time zone. So I'm going to set this to the correct time zone. So I'm going to choose 71. And looking at the system time, we can see that the time is a little bit off for my time zone. So going hand in hand with setting your time zone, you need to configure NTP. Let's do that now. Let's issue the show command to see what config parameters are set up for us by default. The time sync is enabled. The firewall has the server mode enabled, meaning the firewall is considered an NTP source, and it's using this FortiLink interface to provide NTP services. We're not NTP server, so I'm going to disable the NTP server mode. Now we only have NTP sync enabled. So in my scenario, I'm going to set up very specific NTP servers. And so that means I have to configure the firewall with custom settings. And to do that, you define the type, set type as custom. And once you've done that, then you can configure your NTP servers. And our first entry and our second time server. Now, if you issue the show command, we can see all the settings that we've got on the NTP. And in case you're wondering, this NTP sync, how often does the firewall synchronize to the NTP servers? We issue the get command, and then you can see there that the sync interval is 60 minutes. And also now notice that for our time servers, we're actually using DNS names. The firewall needs to be able to resolve the DNS names. So this means our next config should be DNS. Once again, let's issue the show command. Here we have a bunch of default settings. We're going to get rid of all of these and then set our custom servers as our DNS primary and secondary. I'm going to disable the protocol dot. We're not using a DNS over TLS. And also remove the other entry, server host name. My primary DNS would be 8.8.8. And my secondary would be 8.8.4.4. And my domain name is staticroute.io. The next thing we want to do is enable SNMP. This enables us to monitor and observe the behavior and the status of the firewall over time. And to do that, we go to System. Let's go to SNMP. We're going to enable the SNMP agent. I'm going to give this a description. Let's say DC Firewall 01. Let's say it's in the main data center, and our contact info is 0800 000 000. And for this lab, we're not going to be using SNMP version 1 and 2. We're going to be enabling SNMP version 3 because of all the added security and encryption and authentication and all of those things, and the fact that it's best practice. The username here is going to be SRMon for static route monitoring, and our username is just going to be SRMon. And security level, we select authentication. And with authentication, we're going to select SHA-256, change the password to Fortinet. We want privacy, and therefore we enable encryption, AES-256. And just for the purpose of this lab, I'm going to use the same password. And the IP address of our NMS server, 192.168.4.200. And I'm going to leave everything else the way it is and click on apply. The important thing to remember is just enabling SNMP and configuring SNMP is not enough. We need to specify the interface that's going to allow SNMP traffic. And in our case, it's going to be our management interface. We go to Network Interfaces, Management Interface. We enable SNMP. And now I want to log on to our NMS. So now we add a new device. This is the IP address of the target host, which is the firewall at 192.168.4.251. And we're using SNMP version 3. Leave the other settings the way they are. And auth level is auth priv. The username is srmon. The password, Fortigate. And the authentication algorithm we set up SHA-256. Also Fortigate. And our encryption is AS256. And that's it. That's all we need. Now add this device, and the device has been added successfully, but it hasn't been polled, it hasn't been queried yet. So we move on to our next config. We'll come back to this a little bit later. So coming back to the firewall, the next thing that we want to do in terms of monitoring is Syslog. We go to Log and Report, scroll all the way down, click on Log Settings, and here we want to enable the firewall to send logs to our Syslog server. And the IP address of our Syslog server is also our NMS, but we specify the IP address there and enable that, send all logs. And now to check up on the syslogging, we have to SSH into our server. And now we're on our Syslog server. Let's have a look at our logs. We see immediately that there's a folder that's been created for our firewall. So we change into that. And we can immediately see that there's a new log entry file that's been created. Now let's have a look at the contents of this log file. Now we can see log entries coming in from the firewall in real time as we're following the entries coming in. There are many systems out there for ingesting and analyzing logs and log data, but for the sake of this lab, we're just keeping it simple. Now, as part of the firewall management, one of the things that you want to do is because you're not going to be the only engineer that's working on the firewall, you need to create separate user accounts for each person that's going to be logging on and managing the firewall. So let's create our user accounts now. We go to System, Administrators, and I'm going to create a new admin account as an administrator. I'm going to call it sradmin, give it a password, and define the administrator profile. It's a super admin. One of the things you can do with your administrator access is to restrict where they can log in from. And just to demonstrate that, I'm going to specify here that our SR admin account can only log in from this network, 192.168.101.0/24. And two-factor authentication is one of the most critical settings you can have on your firewall. In fact, every administrator account or every user account must have a two-factor authentication of some kind. However, if you try to enable two-factor authentication from the GUI, you get only two options. And if you don't have your FortiToken cloud account or haven't purchased any Forti tokens, this will not work. So I'm going to disable this and edit this account from the CLI. Edit in CLI. Set two-factor under this SR admin account. Set two-factor to email. Set email to. Now let's review our config under this user. We have two-factor authentication using email, and then we have an email address where the OTP is going to be sent to. Now I'm going to log out and then log in as SR admin. Token has been sent. Let me check my email, and the token has arrived. That's 886309. And just like that, our OTP is working. The next thing we want to do is automate backups. We want to configure the firewall to take a backup on a daily basis at a certain time. And the best way to do this is to create an automation stitch. So we go to Security Fabric, Automation, and we want to create the action of backup. And we're going to navigate all the way down to CLI script. I'm just going to call this backup task, and we can tap out the command here, or we can record it in CLI. So I'm going to record it in CLI, exec backup config to SFTP server, and then we give it a name, and the name of our file is going to be DC Firewall 1, and we're going to use percentage date, and then again percentage time. This basically allows us to add the current date and time in the name. So all the daily backups each will have will start with DC Firewall, and then the date, and then the time that the backup is running at. Well, that's the name of our backup file. And here now we have to specify the destination, which is 192.168.4.200, and then the username, srmon, and then the password. So we successfully sent a config file. Now we click on OK, and that command has been recorded. It's now turned into a script, and we need to associate the administrator profile for that. And I'm gonna say super admin and click on OK. So that's for the backup action itself. But what triggers this action is a schedule. We said that we want for the backup to happen every day at the same time. So now let's create our schedule, because we want this action that we just created now, we want it to be triggered at a certain time. And to do that, we go down to schedule, give it a name, say backup schedule, daily at 1 a.m. And that's our trigger. So now we've got the action, we've got the trigger. Now we create our stitch. We call that backup stitch. And we define our trigger, which is backup schedule. And the action is the backup task. And that's about it. So what we can actually do, just to demonstrate this, it's now 9:22. Let me confirm the time on the firewall. It is 9:22. I'm going to change the trigger so that the backup can be executed right now. I'm going to change this to let's say 9:24. Then I'm going to go back to our server, our backup server. So we don't have anything currently. And there, the backup task has just executed now at 9:24. And the backup task tomorrow will be, the date will change, but it'll run at the same time according to the configured trigger. Now let's go back to our monitoring server to see how much we know now about our firewall. We can see that the firewall has been pulled and some data has come across. And in a nutshell, the longer you'll have the firewall being pulled, the more data you'll have and the more meaningful it'll become. And it'll be even better when you've got more devices that you're monitoring with your monitoring server. This brings us to the end of this video. Join me in the next one. Thank you for watching.